Well, Keegan was worried that he was the before lunch speaker and I had to be the after lunch speaker. I wound up getting both. Oh boy. Who enjoyed those pork chops? Well, you're in the front row. If you snore, I'll hear you. Okay, but anybody else can nod off and I won't notice. All right. You know what, Brad? Marcia forgot to ask people the 5 soil health principles as they got a plate of lunch. So everybody got by without taking the quiz. Well, that's true. That's true. You got your own herd. I'll put it that way. All right, great lunch, guys. Thank you. That is awesome. What's on the menu next week? Whatever you're cooking will be here. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about what are some things that we can do less of, and do less of in a way that really accomplishes multiple goals, makes our life better, improves our income, and reduces the impact that we're having on our fields. Because ultimately, we want to have something to pass on to somebody else. That comes in kind of handy. Okay, famous thing on fertilizer: if some is good, more is better. Somebody said something different. Oh, yeah. See, yeah. The fertilizer industry's been telling this for a while. More is gooder, right? So what do we tell ourselves? Nitrogen, it's cheap, right? Well, this year it should be getting a little bit cheaper. It's easy. Most nitrogen's applied by somebody else. Don't have to do it, just have to write the check. And then the other thing, the number one thing that sells fertilizer is what? Fear. Not a soil test, but the soil test creates the fear to sell the fertilizer. So that's, we don't want to run out. Ooh, what if we run out? What if it looks bad and all our neighbors see and then they try and go and rent the ground from us? All these things that run through our minds that we have to change our mindset. The industry tells us, industry runs on tons, right? Do you see them taking away tanks and buildings at the fertilizer dealerships, or are they adding them as fast as they can? It's all about tons. It's all about tons through a fertilizer plant. That's what makes the money. What do universities tell us? This is hilarious. We're going to go into that. So, what's the 4 fates of excess nitrogen? First off, it goes up. Goes to the atmosphere. Goes to the atmosphere typically as nitrous oxide. And nitrous oxide is 283 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. That's the math. Now, is greenhouse gas happening and all this jazz? That's another subject, but that is the reality. Plus, we also get some loss of ammonia. You know what the greatest thing was this fall back where I'm from? Because I know you guys were just excessively wet here. I'm joking. Is it was so dry back home. First off, if the poor propane guy is paid on commission, he's got a Charlie Brown Christmas tree this year, because there was hardly no gas that went out because it was so hot and dry. But the second thing is, there was hardly no ammonia that went out for 6 weeks. I mean, people just, because they couldn't close the trench with the ammonia applicators, it would just gas off to the atmosphere. So no matter what, we're still losing some at application. But the biggest thing is denitrification, losses, nitrous oxide. Okay, the second fate of excess nitrogen is to the soil. Excess nitrogen applied burns carbon out of the soil, because nitrogen and carbon are always trying to find a balance. And when you have the free nitrogen available, it's looking at the simple sugars, the simple to convert carbons, and it's combining them versus letting them go through their legacy of building carbon chains over time to stable humus. And we interrupt that process. And we've interrupted that process for so long that humus in the soil that has a 50-year half-life is not getting replaced. The legacy carbon load is going down. So we continue to degrade what was there in our parent material but we're not replacing it because of our high fertilizer inputs over time. So carbon, they teach 2-year chemistry courses at college just on carbon. There's a lot of forms of it, a lot of ways that it moves through its entire process within the life of the soil. Where's the third place that excess nitrogen goes? Depending on where your water flows to, Gulf of Mexico, Lake Erie, Raccoon River. People in Des Moines get a little ouchy about having the #1 nitrate removing water treatment plant in the world is in Des Moines Water Works. So ouchy, they sued the farmers upstream from it and made quite a bit of noise about it. So are we to blame the people at the Des Moines Water Works for that? Wait a minute. If it got in the stream, whose fault is that? Uh-oh. Those Iowa farmers, Indiana farmers don't farm like that. So nitrates in the surface, we're getting algae blooms and dead zones. What's the fourth fate of excess nitrogen? Groundwater. Well, that's always all sorts of cool stuff. We just drill deeper wells. That's how we solve that problem, right? We don't have any of those pesky surface hand-dug wells anymore because there's lasso in them and nitrates and blue baby syndrome, birth defects, kidney, spleen, and thyroid damage. That's actually just got published in 2021, the effect that we're getting there. And most cities don't do well water, they do surface water, so they're subject to this more. Respiratory and reproduction system damage, cancer. Look at all the cool stuff the excess nitrogen does. So how much should we let fear determine our nitrogen? So the point I want to get here is that how have we been trained to think, back to the compaction layer here, how have we been trained to think about nitrogen? It's a loss. We put more on because we're going to lose some, right? We put it on in the fall because it's cheap as ammonia versus 32 that costs more. And it's a cheaper time of year to apply it because we can get it. And we got the window to do it. The ground conditions are typically better. Spring ammonia. Most people put on spring ammonia too early because they plant when they should, but you should be putting spring ammonia on when it's right to plant. That's those trade-offs we do, right? So we convinced ourselves some loss. Is that the word? Right? Loss is right. What is our loss, though? Our loss is somebody else's, starts with a P. Pollution. Right? It's not a loss. It is a pollution to the atmosphere, to the groundwater, to the carbon, and to the streams. So I think as farmers, we always want to do the right thing. However, we've been trained by the industry to think of it as loss. The reality is it's pollution to my neighbor, no matter if they vote for the wrong person for president or not. Okay, we're polluting somebody else. And when we come to that realization, and it took me a while to think through this, okay, this is like several years. And after you think about that for a while, it starts to bug you. So I'm sorry to everybody here in this room. In about 5 years, when you just finally get there and you're like, that fat guy up the front of the room telling me it was pollution, dang it, I got to make a change, But that's the way to think about it. So excess N, now on the plant side, creates excessive vegetative growth. Because nitrogen, typically drives vegetative growth. Who likes to see tall beans? Everybody likes to see tall beans. Who gives a darn? You don't sell the bean plant, right? Let me ask you this. On a 3-inch internoded bean plant, will that yield more than 1.5 inches? Get a big rank bean plant? What's the fate of it likely in a windy event? It goes down. It's great for the guys selling sickle sections and reel teeth. They love that. And more parts for the dirt going through the combine. So we get excessive vegetative growth. Typically, corn and soybeans, this is not a big deal. In tomatoes, this is a huge deal. Huge deal to have that. You know how we actually combat excessive vegetative growth in tomatoes? If they're going too much and they're not blooming and you just have all this plant material? We apply 20 pounds of table sugar to it, and instantly in like 2 days it'll bloom. Because we take the carbon-nitrogen ratio within that plant was out of balance, had too much nitrogen, add more carbon. Then it says, hey, I'm ready to reproduce. Also, excessive N then creates lower carbon in the plant, which means lower Brix or sugar status. The lower your Brix status, the higher the plant tissue disease and the higher the insect pressure. So we had a great conversation about this. Was it you talking about the corn aphids? Okay, that is a great indication that if you've got corn aphids, you're likely going to have leaf tissue diseases because the Brix are low. The only way the aphids can exist is if you have lower Brix in your plant, because they're a sucking insect. Have you guys ever felt honeydew that aphids leave? It's just sugar. It's a sticky substance that comes out of there. If you get too much sugar in, you'll actually kill them. They can't handle it. So that's what we're trying to do there. And also some of the calcium and the other products that the sugars are assimilated with will cause gut ache issues associated with the bug. So if you want to decrease disease in insects, you increase your Brix. So the higher sugar status we can have in a plant, the more resistant it is to disease. And guess what? That doesn't come from a fungicide and an insecticide. Those are oh crap buttons. Okay? Those are the buttons we poke when we haven't been able to do this. So excess N is a great way to decrease Brix because of that carbon and nitrogen ratio. So your stuff that you thought was cheap, that you apply a little bit more because you're afraid of it being lost, and you're afraid of my neighbors making fun of me, is driving tar spot and insects late season. You ever thought of that before? Co-op didn't tell you that? So that's really key. And plus how we feed that to that plant and how it is available to the plant where we don't have an excessive bump and then run out and make that uneven, that uptake curve and that nitrogen status within the plant also drives insects and disease. And if you have a higher sugar going into an event like you had with the 70-degree days, then you can weather through that because the plant burns the sugar that it makes during the day, stores it in the roots. And you can pull on those sugar reserves for a little bit of time to help with the disease prevention. Yeah?
Question on that. So the field where we had the real problem last night about acres, a couple fields actually, pretty good last year with potatoes. That's the only place we went back to the
Well, I've heard it on good authority on tomato ground around here, everybody under-applies nutrition.
But I mean, could that be why we had...
I only got one laugh out of that.
I know, so that may be why we had it bad on those fields.
How much carbon, what's the carbon-nitrogen ratio of tomato stover? And what's the tons per acre tomato stover? Less than soybeans and about the same ratio as soybeans. It is nothing. I mean, by spring, how many tomato vines you got out there? Only where they stopped or they got roped up, right? It's just bare ground. So there's no carbon sink to absorb the excess nitrogen that was applied to those fields because the cannery told them to apply it because they're afraid of not meeting their quotas. Again, another fear-driven decision to make those things happen. But that is highly probable in interaction there. Excessive carryover nitrogen. Now, a great application after tomatoes, you seed that thick. Yep, seed that thick, terminate early. 3 bushel rye. Get it up into the biomass, get it about this tall, terminate it, but then it'll time release out of that biomass later. It's just sitting there free for the plant to gorge on and draw down that ratio within the plant. Because as you have more nitrogen within the plant, it'll metabolize that carbon. You'll get a great growth spurt, but you don't have the residual sugar levels in there to resist pests and disease. But great question. That's what I love. You guys got tomatoes in this area. It makes me remember when I lived out in California. All right. Okay, here's the help from the universities. Where do the universities get their funding from for their research? From multis, fertilizer companies? Multinational fertilizer chemical corporations. This is like Nancy Pelosi picking stocks, okay? It's the same damn thing. Just watch out that you don't tell anybody because you'll get shot. Okay, conspiracy theories are over, moving on. Core nitrogen rate calculator. Everybody's seen this, right? You all had to sit through this in college, the whole return to nitrogen. You've got as you apply more nitrogen, the cost goes up. As your yield goes up to a certain spot, and then it levels off, and then here's your maximum return to nitrogen. 144 pounds per acre here, 139 is on the lower end. That's where you get, but one more pound, or 5 more pounds gets you 1 more bushel, right? That's the math. So let's just take a little look at this at 450 corn and 56 cents per pound nitrogen. It's going to vary all the time, but it's pretty close. So there's your economic optimum rate, and that's about 0.75 pounds per bushel of corn after beans. And if you take a look right there, the last dollar spent gets you $1 yield. That's what we want to do. We want to maximize stuff. And you look at essentially anything you apply over that, you're losing money and degrading the environment. Anything below that, I would consider a reasonable application rate, not necessarily a maximum application rate. So if you take a look here, there's a study with various different N rates, 0, 25, all the way up to 175. And if you look at, here's the corresponding yield, 124 bushel at 0 applied N. So it achieves 62% of the maximum yield. And if you go across here, when we added 25 pounds, we gained 22 bushel yield. So you look at what your nutrient use efficiency is. And as we go up, we just get decreasing returns, right? Marginal decreasing returns. And I think the key is that when we're getting up to this 139, which is the optimum, we're willing to spend 7.78 pounds of nitrogen to get that last bushel. So if you think about this, 200 bushel crop, and if you were applying nitrogen to get every bushel on a 200 bushel crop, you'd be applying 1,600 pounds of N. Who would apply 1,600 pounds of N per acre in here? That's the equivalent of getting that last bushel if we had to get every bushel that way. You copy me there? I've thought about this for a year more than you guys. I don't know if I'm teaching it right. But what I'm getting at is this is so extraordinary here to get this last, penny, quarter. What are we doing to push it to the very, very end? And I think that's a key. Then all of these models are created out of these wonderful scatter graphs, right? Here's where we have wait a minute, what happened here? Yeah, we had almost near optimum yield at 0 applied. You have this scatter graph, so it's not this perfect curve. A perfect curve never exists in nature. It only exists in statistics, right? And a friend of mine told me once, there's 3 types of things. There's lies, there's damn lies, and then there's statistics, which are even worse, right? So it's just trying to project a line through what that return was. But there's a lot of noise there. And if you look at no statistics and you look at the values underneath of those, there's a lot of noise in any of these predictions. But what we're trying to do is with regenerative management, we're trying to move all these dots this way because the soil is working for us instead of just a place to put the corn. So, bottom line, don't be a moron. Optimum is optimum. There's nothing good about that excess application, point 1, and excess costs through the rest of the production system in disease and pest prevalence. So, it's going to spill over here a little bit into number 2. Other things we can do less. Fungicides and insecticides. Here's why do you spray fungicide and insecticides? The top 10 answers are on the board, right? Chemical retailers pour it, and he needs a stimulus check. They need new trucks. They didn't get all new trucks last year. They need them this year. I like the ads I see online that are in my email feed all the time. They're just constantly barraging me with things to buy. Or, gee, I'm just making so much money, I got to have a write-off. Is that a problem? I got to spend another $40 an acre to get rid of it. I don't have a shed big enough to keep the pallets. Or maybe I created a condition that requires the use of a fungicide. So I think we got to think about these pesticides, all of them, herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, nematicides, parasitides, all of them, and nematicides, is we've created a condition that needs them. Because how did a forest survive without a chemical dealer? How did a prairie survive without a chemical dealer? They had bugs, they had diversity and all these things, but it was an ecosystem that actually, when you look at the calories per year generated by a forest, is 3 times greater than that of a cropland. How did it do it without a chemical dealer? So we're going to start with the basics, the pathogen triangle. And susceptible host, you got the pathogen, you got the environment. You have all three, you got the problem, okay? So pretty simple, right? So what can we change about the host? Instead of just whack the disease, how do we enable these things to not let the disease occur? Mineral status, one thing we can do. Nutrient balance, Brix levels like we've talked about, and also phenology and morphology. We'll talk a little bit about that too, and how the plant expresses itself. So if you look at mineral status, calcium, for example, the king element in our soils. I looked at, here's an example, and this was from a presentation I did at an almond conference. But essentially, botrytis, bread mold, attacks a cell, and here on that, if we can have really high calcium content on the cell walls, it can be resistant. But as calcium content decreases and it's replaced by magnesium or sometimes single charge elements, but mostly magnesium, creates a weaker cell wall and makes it susceptible to infection. So these things can be modified by how we can modify the calcium status, for example, of the plant. Here's another example of a nutrient that has greatly affected the autoimmune response, essentially, of a plant. It is manganese, M-A-N, not to be confused with magnesium. But you can see here, in this area, we have manganese deficiency, and in the foreground we do not. But it's key to, you can apply it and buy it, or if you have lower pH, and actually, believe it or not, this is one of the benefits, one of the few elements that's taken into a plant in a reduced state. So in other words, a waterlogged soil actually has more manganese available to a plant than a dry aerated soil. So sandy ground, high porosity, and high pH will typically have manganese deficiency. It kind of acts the opposite of most everything else we apply to a field. But the other great thing is we have this chemical out here that we just use willy-nilly all the time. Don't cost much, and we use it as another mode of action. And it's just fantastic at tying up zinc, manganese, and iron, because that's what it was originally designed for, as a metal chelator. The other fun thing is what's the half-life of glyphosate in soils? You get a free pork chop if you know this one. Anyone know what the half-life is? 22 years. In fact, today we have such a problem with so much glyphosate in our system. Organic growers that put on 4 tons of chicken litter actually put on almost a full 22-ounce rate of Powermax in the chicken litter, because there's that much in the feed that the chicken ate and crapped out the rear end. Is that really cool or what? See? You guys are doing a burn down. A burn down that smells, right? So there's, and you know, he's been a little bit controversial, and he's a Purdue emeritus, so I mean that makes him okay here, I suppose. But Dr. Don Huber's done a lot of work on this and coordinated a lot of work globally on it. And for 40 years, he's actually served on the Bioterrorism Committee task force for the Pentagon. He's a retired Army colonel. The guy's not nuts, like Big Ag would like you to think. Saw him last week, caught up with him, and the good news is he's been talking about this for a long period of time, and most all of our soils have glyphosate in it at a level that when we apply banded phosphorus releases it, and the plant has to process. So if you're growing non-GMO, you got a little bit of a challenge to overcome there. So trying to work through those things. But he's actually discovered there's a way that you can detoxify the soil by about 90% in 6 months. And it's going to be the craziest thing you've ever heard, and they stumbled across it absolutely accidentally. But raw sauerkraut juice applied at 15 gallons per acre can detoxify the soil of glyphosate by 90% in about 6 months. So there's hope for this because it's a persistent problem, because guess what happened when he detoxified the glyphosate from the soil? Zinc, manganese, and iron on soil tests all increased by about 4 to 5x. So pretty exciting. And then, what's that? It's actually the bacteria that does it. That specific bacteria that makes sauerkraut is the one that actually breaks down AMPA. You have glyphosate. Glyphosate degrades into AMPA, which is actually more toxic than glyphosate. And then it works on the AMPA down. So that was something Bob Kremer and I were working on before he died. And it was neat to see that Huber's continued it. So there's some hope. Instead of just all gloom and doom on this stuff, there's some things we can do. Stay tuned. More information coming. We'll have some tests on that this year on my own farm. Anyway, moving on. Went over the molder chart. One thing that's interesting, typically there's more antagonisms than benefits from it. So a lot of things we can do. Look at the stimulation between manganese and potassium. You know, we're seeing a lot of potassium deficiencies anymore across a large swath of the Corn Belt. A lot of that's driven by our manganese soil tests are kind of hard to accurately do. So there could be something there long term with the amount of glyphosate we've applied. Brix levels. Who's got a refractometer? Nobody? If you're interested in one, they're about $65, I believe. And then the other thing that's super handy is you take a vice grip and you modify it to squeeze the leaves for you. And that's about, you just take a little piece of metal and weld to the end of it. But when you're looking at a Brix meter, you see this color line here? So that tells you the level of Brix. Nothing would survive biting this right here. It's just toxic to an insect. The other thing is you notice how it's not a really clear defined line? It's kind of fuzzy. That fuzzy, when you have a really clear defined line, that sap fluid, you're taking a leaf and squeezing the juice out of it. The juice you put onto a little window, you shut the window, you hold it up to the sun, and that's how it works, okay? So the sunlight's coming through there. If you have a clear line, it's mainly carbohydrates that you're looking at. If you have a fuzzy line like this, typically means there's lots of minerals dissolved in that solution. They cause that refractometer to have a fuzzy line. Brad, I'll help you get one, and if you guys want to take a look at what's going on, if you see aphids somewhere on a hybrid and you don't see it right next door or something, just go and see what the difference is in the Brix levels. I think you'll be pretty interesting to see. Nutrient Management has large fast track and draft foliar been proven to significantly increase Brix and reduce or eliminate the need for fungicides, because the acetic acid in there, which is simply very similar to vinegar, that acetic acid is an oxygen scavenger. So it knocks down a lot of the surface fungal diseases upon application. Much like if you want to equate it to a fungicide, it'd be similar to like the mode of action of tilt. as a knockdown. But anyway, we'll get into that a little bit more. How else can we change this pathogen triangle? Can we lower the load and create competition of the pathogen, right? Think about this. Everything is a meal for something else. Even us. You've watched Shark Week, right? So we can be food for something else. So in nature, everything is a food source. So instead of thinking about the pathogen, are we far enough out from COVID? I can talk about this stuff right now. Okay, so it's like trying to stop the spread of COVID with a mask. Okay, a virus that can go through a mask pore that's 100 times bigger than the virus itself. Okay, that's how we did it. It made us all feel good, right? It made us look responsible, but it didn't really do anything. So how do we outcompete it? How do we create other microbiome that can create beneficial cofactors to resist? How can we make it just, it's another protein like anything else. How do we make it able to be digested by something? That's what we have to look at on these pathogens, is how do we do it? How do we make the plant resist? Then how do we, if we have tar spot we're worried about in a residue, should we buy a residue digester and put it out there to get rid of the residue? Or should we run tillage to bury that residue so we don't have a problem? Get out the old moldboard plows. We're out of luck. John Deere don't make them anymore. What do we do? What if we let the biology of the soil naturally decompose and earthworm activity from good drainage and good calcium status, so we have good oxygen status in the soil? Why don't we let it work for us so we got good fungal species that break down the residues for us? I enjoy letting fungi work versus drive a tractor. You know, they don't need a paycheck. They work for free. So how do we create that environment to reduce the pathogen load? How can we change the environment? You know, moderate the soil or canopy temperatures. Gee, what's something that would moderate the canopy temperature and the soil temperature in a cornfield? Residue? If we left the residue on the surface and if we had a cover crop residue on there, it wouldn't get as hot during the day, it wouldn't get as cold at night, and we wouldn't have as much stress on the plant. Maybe that would change the environment. Maybe we wouldn't splash if we hit residue instead of hit soil, splash disease spores up. Can we, reduce canopy in irrigated pulse irrigation instead of just soak the crap out of it and come back later, doing pulse irrigation and those kind of things. This more for the tomato guys. Or using Throttle Max or Liquid Max, which helps the water get in instead of sit on the surface. We reduce the humidity, which humidity drives many of these diseases. I just left this in here for fun. This is cover crops and almonds. And what we actually do is we grow them in the middles, and then on winter rains, we go through and mow, and then we actually blow it to the berms. And by blowing to the berms, we've basically put straw over the drip tape so that it can't evaporate off. If it can't evaporate off, first off, you don't have to spend any more on the $1,000 an acre foot water. But secondly, you're not creating humidity up and disease within that tree. So there's lots of opportunities that this here we've been able to see. We save 6 to 8 inches of water, increase yields by about $600 per acre, and we reduce weeds in the process and botrytis in the top structure. So if you have to spray insecticides or fungicides, which this is the last resort, this is not part of your crop plan, okay? This isn't, I'm going to budget $40 an acre for that this year. When you're sitting down with your banker, this is an after the fact. Is your sprayer set up right? I think this would be a great opportunity, Brad, to host a lunch and learn on sprayer technologies. There's a lot of sprayers that just are not set up right. There's a lot better technology out there today, from See and Spray applications and pulse width modulation, that really make spraying right with the right droplet size count. Most sprayer, we drive too fast, too slow. We're not creating the right spray droplet size, and we're definitely afraid of drift. So we got air induction nozzles on fungicides, and it's just, there's lots of mistakes made. Time it right. The team here will tell you timing was everything this year. We got to look at the field, not at the calendar. Let the field tell us what's going on, not the calendar and it's time to go fishing, or the calendar and school starting, or whatever the reason is. We got to time it to when it needs it, and that's different every year. Then when you treat the spray water with our burnout ahead of loading the sprayer. This is something that Cross Creek team's setting up this year is the water is going to be pre-treated. So many of these chemistries we're putting out there react with hardness in the water quickly. So you're sitting field side. How many are doing their own spraying? Okay. How many are you doing hot loads? Mix it and haul it? Okay. You have a chance with a hot load if you have the water pre-treated ahead of time, then mix it into the plant. The problem is most acidifiers in the water take 20 minutes to fully activate. I, by dumb luck, used to treat my water at home and haul it in the trailer, then I would mix roadside. That was my old way of doing it. Now I have a mix mate. Awesome. I got a 8,000 gallon tank of treated water, and then it blends it. So I never have active ingredient touching water. I just was looking at your water test. You guys got some awesome water here, okay? It needs help, right? And that's the good part about it. But, acidifying that water and getting it fully treated before adding any active ingredient is huge. And if you need help doing your own, I'm sure one of the team here can help, but treat a water into a tank. And the cool part is treated water in a tank won't grow algae. It's acidified. It can be in full sun, won't matter.
We just did it this morning while you were getting here.
Okay.
So out of the well today is a 7.7 pH. Out of a bottle of water that you're all drinking is 6.6. And our other water out of our other house is 5.5.
Yep, that sounds about right. No mineral. But the biggest thing here is not that I thought it'd be iron content. There's a high amount of carbonates in the water here, really high in carbonate. So carbonate has a real strong buffering capacity. In other words, it don't want to change. Okay, it's kind of like I go to a Baptist church and I say, how many Baptists does it take to change a light bulb? Change. Why change? Right? So the water here has a real strong affinity to not change. But remember that anything you spray, in fungicides and insecticides are probably the most sensitive. Contact herbicides would be next. Soil applied herbicides, such as atrazine or acetochlor, they don't care. They're pre-emerged, they're satisfied in the soil. There's no harder place for water in planet Earth than the soil. So it's the contacts that are the key. So why put out a 50% or a 10% rate because your water quality or mixing methods stink? That's essentially what you're doing. How good a control do you get with a 10% rate? You didn't even know you were doing it. So water quality is critical. And the key is you got to not just sit there, pour in the acidifier into the cone, run it in, pour the active ingredient in, run it in. You have to treat everything because all it takes is that distance from your pump to the sprayer and it's deactivated. That's how critical this is. So it's really key to have everything treated ahead of time. Then the worst thing in the world is pouring glyphosate on top of burnout in the 30-gallon inductor. You just completely smoke the glyphosate because it has a 3.8 pKa. That's the pH that it breaks apart at, and burnout has a pH of 1. So it will just completely roast it. But the weeds appreciate the foliar feeding. Okay, number 3 thing we can do, and we can do less of, is neonicotinoids. Again, Purdue at the forefront here. Dr. Christian Krupke, who's met him? He's a neat guy. You guys have a real resource here. He's one of the 2%ers. My theory is every university, 2% of them are doing some really great stuff. Okay? So he's one, you probably got, that means by math, you got one more left that's doing good work, okay? Illinois, maybe you got 4 because Illinois, I'm not sure who's doing good work there. But Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, he actually got pushed out of USDA for pushing this. You're a tenured professor at USDA and you get pushed out. I didn't think you could get fired from government jobs. Hopefully that changes soon. But anyway, Jonathan Lundgren, he's an amazing gentleman, and he kind of raise the alert on this. Those are two great podcasts that I was able to do. Ag Emerge podcast, I have so much fun doing that. I get to sit down with some really smart people, ask them some cool questions and hang out, and then Kim and Megan have to do all the real work to make it sound good and get it out there. But, every couple of weeks I get to sit down with somebody awesome for an hour. And if you can't find yourself able to go to sleep, turn one of these on, or if you're out in the field going back and forth, take a listen. Either one of those are really good people. Here's the problem with neonics. They're highly water soluble, which is a good thing when you want a seed treatment. Do you want a seed treatment that repels water? Which most insecticides repel water. What would that happen if we put care if I pick on you? Okay. What would happen if we put a seed treatment on there that was water, that repelled water? How would your germination go? It wouldn't work so well, would it? No. Less gooder, yes. So that's why they did it. And if you look at the original patents for BT rootworm, the patent is with a neonic insecticide. So to be on patent, they have to have neonic with that original BT corn rootworm trait, not the corn borer, but the rootworm trait. But it's kind of grown into a thing of its own and a huge profit center for seed companies. So it's very hard to get it without. But it moves into the soil, water courses, and in the groundwater. Cool. 5-year half-life, much longer at higher pHs. So as you go west, where the pHs are higher, in eastern Colorado, it's got a 10-year half-life. It can be taken up by the plant several years later and toxic to beneficial bees. So Dr. Lundgren, one of his researches was they had sunflowers on a field that had corn seed neonics 5 years prior. There was enough neonic in the pollen of the sunflower plants from 5 years prior to kill honeybees. How much fun is that? So, just always remember when you poke the insecticide button, you're dropping a bomb. It's not a smart bomb, it's a nuclear bomb. You're killing everything. For every one pest, there's 1,700 beneficials or non-pests. Okay? So, there is a gentleman who's just south of Chicago in Wilmington, Illinois. Chicago hasn't grown to there yet. But him and his father did a 1031 out of some land that had been developed and bought 500 acres down by me. Guy actually is this on Facebook? No? Okay. Don't on this. Edit this. He reached out to me because he found through Dr. Joel Groover at Western Illinois University, who's big into organic production. He says, hey, who's a person that could farm this farm regeneratively? Well, Joel looked through his long list of names of farmers in Henry County that farm regeneratively, and he found one. And, he actually reached out to me, and we were able to rent the 500 acres. So he had a few stipulations. He says, I want you to do 20% something not normal on my farm every year. I want it to be no-till cover crops, and no neonics is what I told him I'd also do. He's an avid hunter, goes all over the country hunting birds. Everybody's got to do something. So he called me last week. He said him and 2 friends were down there, and they chased out 5 cock pheasants, shot 14 cock pheasants and shot 4. I said, well, that's great. And he says, well, how many have you seen in the past? I've owned the farm for 12 years. I've seen 1 cock pheasant. So, am I in the business of farming cock pheasants? No. Keeping landlords happy? We all have to. But the key is that the insecticides were killing the worms that the baby chicks feed on. Baby chicks have to have like a 25 to 30% protein diet. They get that protein from insects and worms. Because the neonics have degraded and gone away, there's more larvae for the moms to feed the brood. So now we have bobwhite, quail, pheasant, sharp-tailed grouse. All these things are coming back. And typically it's right at about year 4 or 5 that I see it, that it comes back. And we've bought farms adjacent to farms that we've owned for a long time. And I'm walking the field, and you're walking, you hear kind of the bugs and what's going on. You just sense movement and such. You cross the fence line, and it's like silence. And it's unbelievable, that difference that it makes. And it does at about year 5 really change and how things are looking. So every time we buy a farm or pick up a farm, we know it takes about that long. But then once that's long, then the insecticides go away because the beneficials are there to balance things. So it's that first 4 years or so, I got to really watch for slugs and armyworm and all these wireworm, all these nasties, because I'm weaning off of it, right? So there's a weaning period. We have to pay the price for that. So what do you do? Is said first you use excellent IPM practices, and on the podcast somebody said IPM doesn't stand for insurance pest management. Okay, I'm old enough, and I think there's maybe one or two of you in here a little older than me. You remember that it used to stand for integrated pest management. We didn't just go out and do everything all the time to everything, and we didn't have 100% application of technology or pests. So just remember, if your CCA writes recs from the office, or if he looks at the calendar and he just changed the name on the field to protect the innocent, okay, fire him. If you don't have a CCA that has dirty boots that are about wore out, they're not serving you. They're just writing a recipe. The recipe changes all the time. And then create an environment where beneficials can flourish. The high diversity cover crops brings in more bugs. Insect strips. These corners of the fields that you can't hardly harvest worth a darn, leave an insect area in the corner. Where the dang deer eat everything anyway, just go ahead and plant 20 feet of a cover crop that'll feed them to keep them out of your corn. I mean, if you're planting 20 feet of corn that you never harvest, why are you spending $80 an acre on corn seed? Spend $40 an acre on a cover crop seed that they'll actually eat and stay and prefer over your corn crop, and leave it alone. So, equip the crop to defend itself. We can do that. Okay, bricks. They lead to reduction in pests and disease. So aphid group, this is why I was saying you're really low. They're the easiest ones to get rid of. At 6 to 8 bricks, they stop. So you would have had a severe sugar deficiency, excessive nitrogen growth, and excessive auxin production is what was going on there. Your sucking insects, so this would be like thrip, chewing insects, that would be your Japanese beetles and such, and your grasshopper group. We've seen time and time again after we spray a foliar, Japanese beetles go away because we spike the sugar, and they're just not interested in it. But balanced nutrition is the key to make this high, and we've seen this over and over again from California, Michigan, panhandle of Texas to almost the Canadian border. It just happens. So plants can't defend themselves unless we screw it up. Variegated stink bugs. I haven't been here long enough to know, but I don't have an issue with them, but I don't know if they're completely widespread yet. There's no predator for them. That's part of the problem. So natural control is a problem. The only hope would be like here on your chewing insects that you can maintain a high enough Brix level to keep them away. And that's hard to do. If we get really wet conditions or a slow and cloudy and slow in growth, it's hard to hit those levels. Most corn around here is probably in the 5 to 7 range.
On the stink bug issue, because there is a lot of stink bugs through this area in central Washington.
Oh, so you're going to share those with us while we share the resistant water hemp? Cool.
I will say that I'm not sure if it's predatory or not. We did see the fire, the big fire into no belly whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
So this year, after they had all that cover crop we planted green shit, the spider population was stupidly high. What was interesting, those ones, I hadn't seen those for years. And I remember being agronomist 15 years ago, walking the field, and they were all over it. Today, you don't ever see them.
That's a good point.
But interesting, I'm not advocating for it when I thought it was interesting for a the spider provide?
I don't think anybody's looking for earthworms in their fields as a definition of success. But you know, if you have earthworms, everything else is working. You know, I'm not looking for birds as a definition of success. But I know if I got them, the food web is working. The spiders could be similar. If you have spiders, they've got something to eat. You know, because essentially those neonics don't kill spiders. They're not an arachnicide. They won't affect arachnids.
I know we kept bees, but I never seen so many spider webs.
Yeah.
Compound like daisies in color.
Interesting. So, probably something you can put in a jug, Brad. You know, spider eggs. All right. Number 4 thing we can do less of: GMOs. The technology's half the price to seed. You know, mRNA can be used for genetic modification now of plants and animals, tailored antibiotics and soil microbes. One of the companies that our group's invested in is Genvax. So mRNA vaccinations for hogs, where you can turn it around in 48 hours, have your problem solved. Gene-edited microbes for soil inoculation are available now. What could possibly go wrong? Biopesticides will be coming at a rapid rate. But remember, if it has a side in it, it still kills, even though if it's a natural pesticide. We have to think differently. We have to think about, how do we prosper life? How do we outgrow things? How do we compete against our pests instead of just trying to kill stuff? Because when we kill stuff, we inadvertently cause another problem. So and then the other thing to remember is when we change the genetic code, we change nutrients in the plant. I don't have manganese deficiency issues, sudden death issues in my beans. They're all non-GMO. I don't have that sulfur striping issue like you get in a certain Bayer-owned seed company that you see all the time in a putrid yellow corn, right? There's things that change in nutrient cycling once we modify genetics. Besides, like I say, what could possibly go wrong? You know, they've found that the CRISPR gene sequence has 14 matches on the honeybean genome. What could possibly go wrong? And they tout this as highly targeted and highly efficient. You know, issues related to leaky gut and chronic inflammation are being associated with the BT. So we're just kind of like the Wild West, and now all of a sudden stuff's coming back to haunt us. So take a look, and if you can do it without it, save money, pick up a premium, not all bad. Okay, number 5 thing we can do less: tillage. Disrupts the fungal association, oxidizes soil carbon, destroys aggregates, infiltration. You know, most compaction is a soil chemistry problem, not necessarily a physical problem. And then the other thing is it's actually deadly. So this is May 3rd, and someone from the Farm Bureau told the state police that, oh, there's just nothing farmers can do about this. It's something that happens in the spring. They got to till. And I guess by Effingham, Illinois, you have to till. It's a law down there. 72-car pileup because of dust from a windstorm. 6 people died. That's just, what is right about this? Just absolutely insane. Here's 3 days later. My wife's bringing me lunch. I'm planting up here, okay? The wind, you see the towers in the background blowing across here. You see I am kicking up a little bit of dust because I'm in the Soil Health Partnership plot where I've done long-term studies with and without cover crops. So I'm kicking up a little bit of dust, but still it's because it's no-till. She turns to the left, and this guy over here is rocking and rolling, man, getting her done. Same day. I mean, he's a quarter mile south of me. And plus, it makes a big difference on infiltration. Anyone measured infiltration rate on their farm? Okay, good. Simple way to do it. In fact, Brad will let you do it. Take one of these home with you. Okay, you go to the hardware store, get yourself a 6-inch PVC connector. And it's got that handy little ring in the middle where you put 2 6-inch PVCs together. Take a hammer, and a 2x6, set it over top and drive it into the ground until you reach about that middle ring. So you got it in the ground 1.5 to 2 inches. Then you get your phone out, hit the stopwatch, and you pour this in. This is 1 inch of water in a 6-inch thing. And time it, how long it takes for your water to soak in. And it gives you a really good idea of how your soil is performing. Normally you guys get too much water here, so getting it in is pretty important. So on our farm, long-term cover crops, diversity and grazing, takes 2 minutes and 28 seconds to infiltrate 1 inch of water. Right across the neighbor, good friend of mine, long-term deep tillage, doing everything right. 15 minutes and 36 seconds. I mean, we can get 1 inch of rain in 15 minutes and 36 seconds, right? That is not unheard of anymore. If it doesn't go in, where does it go? Somewhere you need it later on. So anyway, so now what's next? Have a plan for your entire season ahead of time. Now's the time to determine that, not in the moment. Plan to use less. Reallocate budgets to areas to improve soil and plant health in order to spend less on the whack-a-moles. Pre-plan that ahead of time and realize that, hey, if we stop neonics, it's a 5-year thing. Hey, if we start cover crops, it took me 4 or 5 years to kind of figure out the equipment. There's some gut aches in there in the meantime, and some cussing, That's just kind of the way it goes when you do that. But it's not, oh, can't do it, heck with that, go back to what I know. It's like, okay, how do we move forward? Because we know that's the goal, is to do what's best with God's design. And then execute. When the Navy SEALs breach, they don't say, oh, gee, maybe on a little bit, boom. It's execute, bam, the second guy in the door is shooting. That's how you have to be. And my son-in-law is retired now, the SWAT team, state police. They didn't sit around to, say, gee, is anybody home? It was police, bam. He got a lot of activity because we got Chicago. We practice what we preach. Everything you do, we do on our own farm. And we have a lot of things that we do that don't work, that we don't recommend, so that's good. But 31 years of no tillage, 26 years of low nitrogen, 11 years no fungicide and insecticides, 8 years non-GMO, and 6 years of no neonics. But here's the thing. Yeah, I started a long time ago, but when's the best time for you to start? Today. But the cool part is the technology we have today for planters and our understanding that we have today, because a lot of pioneers, and Indiana has a lot of pioneers in this department. Indiana and Iowa really lead in conservation agriculture. So it's not easy. Everybody wants change, right? Who wants to change? Don't sign up for a committee, right? But, I'm willing to lead it, and I think several other people are too. So here's what we're doing for 2025. I want to eliminate herbicides. I want to grow my nitrogen. I'm going to be growing hay, grazing covers, buckwheat after winter triticale for cover crop seed. We're also doing now seed production and direct marketing of non-GMO soybeans. That'll be bioprimed and epigenetically adapted, where we'll let farmers grow the seed, take it back, clean it, and send it back to them. Here's some other businesses. If you can, tune in to this Ag Emerge podcast. It's a lot of fun. It is amazing the great people that are out there really trying to help us make all this happen. Did you want me to share any research results? Or I don't have to. Am I over time?
No, you're fine.
I'm fine? Okay. Residue digester. So we're always testing new products, trying to find stuff to replace what we've got, which is great. So here's one that's real popular on the market and is sold by, 8 different labels. And I thought, well, let's try this out and see, and applied it. And this is in 7 reps. I did gain 0.49 bushel per acre in soybeans. So at 12.5 per acre was my cost. I think we can get to break even when soybeans are at $25 an acre. And if we could get it up to $30 an acre soybeans, we'd have a good return on investment. So once again, if you have a system that's built to do residue digestion and be biologically active, the jug is just added cost. You know, if we think on a systems approach to where everything is synergistic, now if I would have put this into a typical conventional field, there's probably a payback on it. But why not build an entire production system that's just doing it for you without having to add that extra expense? Well, this one blew my mind. This is not possible. But this is a John Deere 1990 CCS versus 30-inch row planter, or a 15-inch row planter. Early planting date with a 2.6 non-GMO soybean. So this year, we found that these are our worst soybeans, was the early planted beans. Our best beans were our last planted beans. But Ken Ferry is not going to send me a check. So every year is different, right? 5 replications. I thought this was interesting. You know, we had a 1.32 bushel advantage to a drill. I just mind-blowing. It wasn't, the weed control was fine. There was nothing there. I just found that interesting. So typically, planter always places it better, and we have better performance with it. So anyway, I am moving. I have a Horsch Avatar now on 10-inch centers. We plant beans and small grains with the Horsch, and then the Maestro for the 30-inch corn. I don't get paid to say this at all. Horsch Avatar is the best drill I've ever seen. I did it just because it was simplistic and easy to work on. I went out and I penetrated concrete this fall. A neighbor that had driven on it with silage trucks and germinated it before rain. I've absolutely blown away how the row unit design wicks water up to the seed. I just was getting a more convenient thing. It's been the most mind-blowing piece of equipment I've purchased in a while. New tillage and cover crop trial. So this is interesting, and this is year 1 of 10, but we have 4 reps and then 4 treatments. So we have no-till with cover crop, tillage with cover crop. So across the entire 40-acre plot, it was very, very consistent. The only thing that really stands out, you know, these are definitely too tight for stats. This here may hit stats, but it was consistently low, the tillage with the cover crop. So I don't know exactly what's going on there, but when we work in those cover crops may not be a good thing, like hitting it in the spring to work it in. Stay tuned. Also, we're putting a tile water monitoring system in this, so we're comparing just your standard tile to draws on a neighbor that is on the co-op board. So the only way you get on the co-op board is if you're generous in your applications, compared to our 4-inch tile with our don't make the co-op rich, and then compared to our pattern tile, just to see what that is, and it's going to be a part of a long-term study. My hypothesis is low input, appropriately timed nutrients will not eject into a system tile like slug feeding high rate nutrients will. And I think we're going to get laws that eliminate system tiling, but we need to have the data set there to refute that by showing that, hey, if farmers go to responsible, appropriately timed nutrition, don't take away this amazing tool we have for growing crops and preventing soil erosion called pattern tiling. Because how bureaucrats work is, oh, no more tile. You know, that's how they'll work. So we're trying to create that data set ahead of time so that 10 years from now we can hit that intersection of regulation. This is now our 10th year on the Soil Health Partnership study that you saw the photo of, 4 reps, corn on corn, non-GMO this year. I thought this was interesting. The cover crops actually were 10.03 bushel better. Also 0.39% drier. So typically more biological activity will help a plant to mature and dry down better. We see that pretty consistently with our on-seed. We'll gain 0.4, 0.5% drier at harvest compared to no on-seed. And last year was the first year of yield increase for corn with covers. So if you're frustrated by cover crops, I am too. You know, that was my fourth time growing corn, and finally on my fourth time I had a yield increase from the covers. I'd always had a yield even or drag earlier. Now beans, always been ahead. Cover crops ahead of beans. So this is just the reality here. Future fun, carbon encapsulated biologicals. We've demonstrated some synergy with RevUp out in western Kansas. We're going to continue to pursue this. This is an interesting process. On-seed program testing, looking at burnout fast-track bios entrenched with a new citric acid chelated micro or lactic acid chelated micro. So stay tuned, that's coming. My goal has always been to kill ignition, but I haven't been able to. We might finally be able to because it just requires lots of trucks, trains, and working with 2 people worldwide to get the product. So then we're going to continue to work on non-GMO and organic soybean seed, epigenetics from the seed saving, air separation of the foundation seed, thanks to Mark Apelt. He helped us with that. Plus, we're also going to do bioinoculation of hybrid seed corn production. So in other words, we do a microbial drench on the female in the hybrid seed production, actually primes the seed with microbes called endophytes, so that when the seed grows next year on your field, it is pre-inoculated with a high diversity of microbes that it exudes or has in reserve to use whenever it needs for mineral status. So that's kind of exciting stuff. So anyway, then for fun, which is better? $234 bushel acre, 269.
All things being equal.
I just said what's better. Are you kidding me? I have 35 more bushels. Brad, he's not invited back in the future. It's just take him off the list. He's just too hard to work with. He's hitting it right on the head. Okay, yields, coffee shops. Where'd our social media advisor go? Is she? Okay, don't listen. It's like the boys' locker room in junior high. Everybody's comparing everything, okay? So, but it doesn't mean a dang thing. So let's look at this and run through some scenarios here. So we got the neighbor and we got a customer. He called me up and was like, oh man. He said, oh, this neighbor, he's straight shooter. He's telling me exactly what's going on. 35 bushel more on his farm. Oh, how do they do? And I started walking him through, talking him off the ledge. And seed corn, he's got full traded stuff versus non-GMO. Well, there's a little difference in dollars per acre. Got a cover crop the other guy didn't have, so that cost some money. Got some tillage, and I added in $10 just for the extra application equipment on the planter that he has that this guy doesn't. So there's a $30 difference. He pours the coals to it, man, and we're a bunch of tightwads, but the nitrogen costs more per acre. And plow down, you got to do 200, man, let it rip. And then here, we got about 42 on the planter. Fungicide and insecticide, yeah, you got to do that. Every good farmer does. And then this is our foliar cost here. So total cost difference, that adds up. But he lost 35 bushel at 440. Maybe you guys are better at marketing. So that's $154. So at the end of the day, all winds up about the same, but he can get a 20 cent to 40 cent premium on that bushels. So I think it's important. That's just an example. I would recommend you do a comparative budget too when you hear people talk about that, or you become disappointed with yield levels or something like that, is that it's not always about yield. It's about profit. And everybody talks yield. And they talk yield because they can't do the math for the profit. It's too hard. There's so many moving things. Even with great accounting systems, it's super hard to know your profitability levels. So just always keep that in mind. Think through the profit on the end, and think through down the road, who's building soil there? Ben or his neighbor? Who's going to have it better? Maybe not this quarter or this month, like business thinks today. We need to think like farmers used to. Who's going to be better in a generation? So there's lots of great possibilities out there. So any questions or anything? I think I kept most everybody awake. Uh-oh. Yes, sir.
You had the one comparison between the drill and the 15-inch plant on the beans.
Mm-hmm.
What's the herbicide for
It was the same across the whole thing, so they were within the field, and I alternated the planters. Okay, so herbicide program on soybeans is 10 days pre-plant in that case, so I would have been out there at about April 10th to 13th, 2,4-D only. I plant green. Then I spray glyphosate with Zidua Pro as my residual, and the sharpen and air helps to pick up any broadleaf that may have come through since the 2,4-D application. Then it emerges. Later on, I come back with famosophin and clethodim. There we go. Famosophin and clethodim. Then if I need to, I'll come back with whatever the chemical name is for Cobra, and another select if I need to. On there. Yeah. Interesting thing, ran out of Cobra availability in the neighborhood, and I had some to do, so they said, why don't you try Ultra Blazer? I did. And interesting part is that I had green stem beans wherever I sprayed Ultra Blazer. And I actually had a 6 bushel yield increase. So was that the Ultra Blazer causing a yield increase or lack of Cobra? But I actually spot sprayed it, so it was actually 6 bushel better where I'd sprayed Ultra Blazer only versus no Cobra. So just freak accident there. I'm going to investigate that a little bit more, what's going on with that chemistry. So yeah, so there's your program. Three passes, probably 4. So overall, I've got my total spend is I'll double check. I got it on my spreadsheet somewhere. It's either $32 or $38 is my total herbicide spend. Any other questions? And I think it's 38 on beans and 33 on corn, where I'm at. If I have to put Acuron in, that kicks me up $4 an acre over other stuff. I have Acuron for some burr cucumber. Yeah, Brad? Okay. Well, thank you. I'll be here and look forward to learning more from our next speaker.
All right, let me go get Tommy round up.
Uh-oh. Is the market closed?
The good thing about Tommy is
Oh, he's right there.
he's everywhere.
All the days I could speak, corn's up 8.
It's a big rally today.
I sold it up 6, so I showed them.
There you
Good
go.
to see you.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Here you go. You want a clicker, or are you just talking from?
I'm just going to bullshit.
Okay.
I need your,
Oh, yeah.
stuff.
So, funny story.
Hold on, Tommy, I'll get you. You can throw both of them on.
Thanks. Are you recording it?
Yeah.
I've never done this before.
Oh, you're on TV all day long. You've never done this.
Without makeup.
Hey, I'm not putting makeup on you, so don't worry.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Brad, and the whole team for having me. So Brad asked me to come here like a month or 2 ago. I'm like, yeah, no problem. And he called me the other day. He's like, we got to film a Primo video. And I'm like, all right. I call him Friday morning. I'm like, Brad, we ain't filming shit. I'm quitting my job in about 2 hours. He's like, you still gonna be there? I'm like, yeah, I'll be there. So anyway, I went independent as an independent broker. I've always been an independent trader. I live 2 hours north of here in Valparaiso, Indiana. Thank you for having me here. If you need to get a hold of me, this is how you get a hold of me if you just take a picture of that QR code, or if you go to agbull.com, you can just click and say, I want to talk to you. But I'm not here to sell you on futures and options. Although Friday, as of 2 o'clock, I had no clients. So I spent 10 years getting 250 clients. And at 2 o'clock, I said, hell with it, I'm out. And so when you quit, you literally have nothing. So I could use one or two. I had no clients for about an hour. And so when I'm back there texting, I'm texting people to do paperwork. It's an absolute privilege and honor to be here. True story, Brad and Marcia were my second client ever when I started my brokerage career. So I'm really, unless I was in the hospital or something, I'm going to be here. Okay, I want to talk about the markets real quick. How do we get here? I want to take us all the way back to when I first met Brad. God, it was probably 08, 09. Definitely knew you during the drought, right? Yeah, of course. Yeah, during the drought. I remember picking you up at the airport. That was so cool when you come in on that little Honda Bex-Jet. And I'm like, there must be something special in that seed to be flying that. Anyway, it's always easy to pick on people who have jets, but you almost got to wonder, what are they doing right in a positive way? Anytime the market goes up, the first part of what I want to talk about is how do we get here? Like, why are things tough now? Whenever the market goes up, it motivates and what's the word? Incentivizes. Just full disclosure, I got home at 11 last night and woke up at 2:30 in Nashville today to drive here. I wasn't drinking, I was calling clients, so I'm a little tired. It incentivizes people to plant. And so the drought of 12, although I think a lot of people did well through crop insurance, I don't ever think when you don't have the bushels, you're doing well, but you still could have done well financially. But whenever we shoot the market up like that, it screws everything up. And so anytime corn goes to 8, it's pretty cool until it goes back down to 4 for many years. So after we went up to 8 and 12, 13 we had some higher prices, and then by 14 it was over. Between 2014 and 2020, we had like 2,700 days where corn futures didn't go above $5. Not like they kind of went to 5. Literally, Chicago Board of Trade corn futures didn't go above $5 for 2,700 days. And then we had the pandemic, and we traded down real low, like down to the 3s, but then we came out of that with this great inflation boom. And then the inflation boom went into the Ukraine boom, which could not have been planned for, and we call that like a black swan event. So a lot of my clients are up in North Dakota, and the amount of money they made during the Ukraine boom was just crazy, because all the things Ukraine grows, they can grow up there. Sunflowers, remember, they're like, oh, Ukraine's famous for sunflowers and sunflower oil, corn. It just made everything go up. So inflation was doing a good job of making things go up. The other thing inflation made go up was your cost. But I can't bash inflation, because this looks like a room full of men that probably own some land, and that made that go up. And it made Brad's old tractor go up. It also made, like, whatever you paid for this building back in the day, it would probably cost 3 times now, right? Between concrete and stuff. So like, if you're in the business and you own sections of ground and you own equipment and you own buildings and you own bins, inflation, you can't sit here and bash inflation. It doubled your net worth. If you're younger and you're in this room and you're like, I don't own a lot of ground, I'm paying too much for cash rent, and I'm supposed to buy all this new stuff to get bigger bushels to sell at a lower price, you're probably frustrated, scared, angry. But I do have to, although I didn't understand that whole last conversation, I understand that in the young man's name who was speaking, Monty is in the bushel business, correct? We're not in the prevent plant business. We're not in the let's hope we have a drought. He's in the bushel business. And from what I'm doing in grain marketing, it's the same thing. If you have bushels, I want to help you market them. So if I can give you any tidbits on that first part, is we have highs and lows, highs and lows. Anytime we go up as hard as we did in grains, we're going to come down and stay at low prices for quite a while. We're in that low price cycle right now. Now, corn is or was up 8 cents a few minutes ago. I think it's only up 7 or 6. It might have some selling here before the end of the day, just because if I was working today, I'd be texting every client I have, hey, it's a good day, maybe sell a little corn, lighten up on your positions, okay? Not your positions, but your cash positions. It's great that corn's up 8 cents, but it's not like it's going to change any of our lives today. But what the corn market is doing today is the fronts are going up faster than the backs. So you say, wow, that's great. Corn's up 8 cents. I didn't look, but if I did look, I bet you December 25 corn, if someone wants to look for me on just one of those apps or bar chart, it's only up 2. Yes, we're totally front end up today because the USDA report that came out, they said there's 150 million less bushels due to greater demand. And so we're totally going like this, meaning the front end's rallying faster than the back. And when the corn stocks are going down like this and the bean stocks are actually staying the same and going up in the world, it's really incentivizing Americans to plant a lot of corn. All right, that's like today's little part. Let's go back to all this history. One of the bad things that happened, well, it was good and bad, but when corn had that lost 2,700 days of staying below $5, interest rates were also very affordable because we had that time from the great housing debacle of 08, we took interest rates down really far. And we just kept them there. And that was quantitative easing, QE1, QE2, QE3. Used to see the Business Channel talk about the Bernanke put. So with cheap, I hate to say the word cheap, with affordable, you don't sell cheap cars. I have an affordable car for sale. Well, you guys had a lot of affordable corn for sale for 2,700 days, but you also had affordable interest rates. And if there's anything that's probably hurting someone right now in their grain marketing, I'm not here to give you a speech telling you need to be a better farmer. I assume this whole room is awesome at farming. Real quick disclosure though, does anyone suck at farming before we get started? I never, and no one ever raises their hand. Every once in a while, someone points to their guy. He has all the weeds in his field. When they do those, does anyone have, what's like the worst weed you could have? No one ever has it, but their neighbor does, right? So no one sucks at farming. No one's selling junky seed. I've never went to the seed meeting and they go, this is the affordable, low quality seed. Maybe Brad's like, this is the blue light special over here. So we're all selling good stuff. We want good stuff. The problem is, it is definitely a problem. I'm not going to make, my speech doesn't need to be long. It just needs to be truthful. The problem is your costs are high this year, and your costs are probably going to stay high for a while. And with how healthy the American economy is and the world economies, I don't know if the world economy is so healthy, but the American economy, when I say economy, I mean stock market, not necessarily someone working 3 part-time jobs healthy, but the overall wealth effect in America was very much in the stock market. So when you go back to those 2,700 days, those days taught you how to store and ignore, where you're like, it's okay, I'm just going to wait my way through. And by waiting your way through, you get a day like today where the spreads rally, the basis is rallying, and things start to look good. And interest rates were so low that you could actually afford to make choices like that. But when interest rates shot up, the average operating was going out at 3 or 4% for forever. And my job, when I became a commodity broker in 2014, was kind of boring. The markets were starting to come down, interest rates were down. Farmers were always hoping corn would go back up to those higher levels. They didn't. When they did it viciously. Let me give you an example. Corn stayed below $5 for 2,700 days. It went from 5 to 6 pretty quick. And it went from like 6 to 7 really quick. And it went from 7 to 8. Like one of the moves was $2,700 to get to 5. 5 to 6, 125 days. 6 to 7 was like 14 days. So when you get 2,700 days of being below 5, 550 or 6 looks good, and then 2 weeks later you're at 7, you get all messed up. Would everyone agree? You almost, right. If you just knew, if I could just come here and tell you, cheap corn's 450, high corn's 550, you'd be like, got it. Now I'm going to go grow the bushels. That would make all of our lives a lot easier. So anytime you've ever sold corn and it breaks a bunch or rallies a bunch, it really messes you up. I'll give you an example. In my world, Like I once owned a membership at the exchange, and it was like the same price forever. Sure as heck, I sold it and it tripled in price the next 3 months. I was sick to my stomach. And what it caused me to do was never want to sell any other memberships I have at the exchange because I always thought something crazy was going to happen. In corn, it's a big deal. If we grow 15 billion bushels of corn in America and it goes from 5 to 7, that's an incredible amount of wealth that's built. But today, we don't have that. So what I want to talk to you about is just understanding if it's not hard enough that the price of corn is low, the incline you're walking on the treadmill is higher. So when interest rates are at 3%, just look at like you're going on the treadmill at 1%. No problem. You're pretending you're walking and exercising. You're walking at 2.0 on a 1% incline. When interest rates go up, you're still walking at 2.0, but you're at like a 5-6% incline. And so when interest rates are up, it's very important that this room realize how expensive it is to store corn. Those spreads better be rallying like that. Those spreads are rallying like that to incentivize you to let go of corn. But those spreads aren't acting that way in soybeans. And for as great as it feels, like if this room wants to be pumped and say, yeah, corn's up 8, you look at next year's, it's up 2. Well, ain't none of us getting rich with 440 corn. I would imagine that's pretty much a loss for a lot of people. Even if you own your ground and you're not charging yourself much in rent, you could still be renting that ground out to some cash rent cowboy who's willing to pay too much, and then taking your profit from the rented ground and putting it in a CD at 4.5%. So the opportunity costs and the bad habits that were developed from 14 to 20 kind of made people in some ways worse at marketing, because when we go up, they got really confused. And now when we went down, not one of us, like if I knew where corn was going, I wouldn't have sold it up 6 as it's up 7 right now, right? I'd be long it and just be laughing. But I'm happy for my clients in this room that corn's going up. So an example of what I think you can do to, you're probably not going to get the price of corn you want for the next few years, but you have to take a piece of paper, an Excel spreadsheet, a program. Brad's associated with all types of people. And you have to get to corn where you realize how you're cash flowing. So something that'd be really, really bad is if someone sold, had corn pre-sold for the harvest and then stored this corn right now in their bushel all the way out till May, June, July, August. If you sell it for less than it's worth now, you're really probably selling that corn, in theory, 40 cents cheaper from all the time you burnt up in interest. Whereas in the old days when interests were lower, it might have only been 5, 8, 10 cents a cost. So I think it's happening to younger, or it doesn't matter your age, not as well capitalized farmers versus others, is I think right now we're having a cash burn. Does that sound, even if you're wealthy, no one likes to go spend $2 million and get 1.9 back. You could have just done something else that year, right? And I feel like that's where agriculture is, and that's where agriculture is a lot. Things we don't know, Trump administration or whatever administration it would have been or is, there's flying bullets going around and stuff. You got to be careful. I feel like the United States government's going to send out some money to farmers again. Again, it would be nicer if we knew that before. Like, hey, don't worry, you're going to grow corn, lose 50 cents a bushel, but the government's going to give you 60 cents. It's going to be okay. We don't know that. Whenever we do get those injections of money, it makes you feel better. Right before I came on, when Brad was joking, he's like, hey, it's your turn. It was my friend, and I think you know him. You know Adam Kleiss from Iowa? Adam Kleiss called. He goes, you want to hear a weird story? He's part of one of those like bag clubs where you get a shop like this and you get, 20 guys together playing bags. They drink a couple beers, bet some money. And he's really, really good at bags. He wins championships, which means he gets bragging rights and $100, and he doesn't have to hang out with his wife on Saturday because he's got bags going. I'd personally rather hang out with my wife. But he said what was interesting was and this is weird because you see the stock market all-time highs. He goes, my bag club got canceled. And I go, why? he said so many people around the Waterloo area got laid off from ag jobs that these guys are, they cannot be drinking Busch Light and throwing bags. They really are bummed out. He said over half the bag club right now is unemployed. So to me, when I drive around here, this looks like America. This looks great. Things look good around here. It's clean, it's pristine. You got Kokomo looks like it's exploding when you come off the highway. I-65 up and down, left and right. They're building stuff all over. But that kind of hit me that the ag economy is in a little trouble. Do you all feel that the ag economy is in a little trouble? I don't know what we could do about it. We're just agreeing to agree, right? What's that? Well, we could fill in the bag club and be like, yeah. So my whole point today was just to tell you there's highs, there's lows. You don't want to get too bearish when things are down. You don't want to get too bullish when things are up. When markets are up for a little bit, people get pretty aggressive. Like they make bad choices. So choices made during good times come back to haunt you during bad times. We're doing that right now a little bit for some people. Also, people who have their cash during bad times get some crazy bargains that are on sale when someone who was too aggressive. So when people are too aggressive, it was so slow. It was so slow 3 hours ago. I almost fell asleep. Now the markets are busy, but I love it. When people get too aggressive during good times, they end up getting out of that trade and selling it to the people who have the cash during bad times. I don't want that to happen to any of you. So to be too aggressive when things are good, it's the most hardest, to me it's hard. Nothing worse than me having a checking account with a lot of money in it. I'm looking at new vehicles, I'm looking at this, my wife thinks we need to go to Florida. You're just better off to get rid of that money and do something with it. One of the dilemmas in farming is you don't want to owe taxes, or as you get older, there's problems there. But overall speech and theme today is this: we will probably be in a lower price grain market for a while. With that, you have to lower your expectations. If you think that's the problem, that's not nearly the problem. Is the outside inflation in the world still kind of churning pretty high and pretty hard? For example, the insurance company I was doing all my stuff through, Nationwide, I guess they're like closing or something. So I had to get new insurance. I think I got something called Safeco. And I found out the other day for my home, 4 cars, I have 2 girls, my little apartment in Nashville, and just a couple other things. My insurance is $1,100 every month on homes, autos, and a few other stuffs. And I swear it wasn't that much a few years ago. It didn't seem that bad. So I asked the insurance company, how much did insurance go up? She said, your stuff went up 30%. I said, but I didn't get a DUI. I didn't burn anything. Like, what happened? She goes, no, everyone's went up 30%. So when you're watching TV and they say inflation's coming down, it didn't for me. And so that's a new expense to me, and I don't appreciate that, but it's not like I can fight the insurance people and say, heck with it, I'm going to take the insurance off the house. When I'm talking about puts and calls and options, that's just insurance. If you own calls, it's insurance on the upside. If you own puts, it's insurance on the downside. If you sell futures, it's a sale, but not an elevator. I think all you guys understand this. If you don't, call me, I'll walk you through it. But it's going to be 2025 in a few weeks. I don't think anyone doesn't understand that they can sell a Board of Trade future. The thing I do is that I don't farm, but when corn's cheap, I buy it. And it really pisses you guys off, because if you have a high cost production of $5, or that, who's to say that's high? That may be normal. If you have a cost production that's $5 and you see that Tom Grisafi bought 10 corn futures at $3.80, that should piss you off. What pisses me off is when corn's $7.50, and if I want to buy corn, I have to pay $7.50. Whereas you may say, oh my God, we got lucky this year. Our cost production was $5.25. We're selling $7 corn. So sometimes you guys are winning, where the speculators get long. We get a weather event. Who the heck knows? Ukraine war. But the Ukraine war really, really distorted agriculture prices. And anytime we have a distortion, we have a pullback, and that's where we are now. So what I want you to do for advice, if you want to leave with a little advice, is reward these rallies today. Reward these rallies in corn. I know you probably don't want to pick up your check in December. Go pick it up in January. You can own as much corn as you want on paper. I think dealing in the physical bushel could get really tricky, especially in soybeans. So corn obviously has quietly a little better story than everyone was portraying. Soybean story is getting more bearish and more bearish. So the corn bean ratio is going crazy, where corn's gently going up and beans are going down to sideways. The market's telling you plant more corn next year. If you plant more corn next year and don't sell more corn next year, you're going to find out at harvest then that spread, well, I made this decision today because the market was here, but by harvest, the market could be somewhere else. So decisions made today will very much, if you don't take what's on the other 6 months of that, could come back and hurt you. Definitely people are calling more often and saying, I'm going to sell 50,000 bushels of corn. I want to spend $4 or $5 grand and own it back on paper. Fine. Sell the corn, pay down the interest, get ready to renew operating. I have an office in North Dakota at a bank, and the bankers are starting to say some of the young guys are already stressed again. I go, it's not even that bad yet, and they just came off some good years. They go, they've already burnt through the money. Now, I don't get to see their balance sheet. I don't know if they spend it on this or that or anything else. I'm not like Brad knows some of those guys. They're like financial gurus and stuff. I'm a futures and options guy. So with that, my best meetings are usually when I don't have a PowerPoint. I usually speak a little better if I had a little more sleep, but I welcome any questions or comments. I'm not going to lie to you. The soybean story for 25 looks scary. Does anyone super optimistic about soybeans in 25? I think you'll have opportunities to sell corn, but this bean market is like the technology. My clients up in North Dakota always are planning on growing 35 bushel beans, and they grow 54. They do okay because the bushels showed up, but they're always shocked that the yields have expanded. Does anyone? I know there were some problems with yield in some areas across America, but for the most part, there was a pretty good crop out there. To leave you on an optimistic note till we get into Q&A, we have unbelievable demand. We have absolutely great demand. All this talk of tariffs may never, ever happen. This is a different Trump administration than 16. This is nothing like the Trump administration of 16 when it comes to preparedness. He didn't think he was going to win in 16. He was just kind of kidding and ran. He won. He really tried to win this time and won, and had a lot of years to think about who he can trust and people to surround himself with. So like my acquaintance friend, Governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, within weeks of winning the election, he's on the energy thing and the this, and I'm seeing some good names in the administration. I would hope, regardless what party won, that they would put really, really, really strong names to help them. I don't know anything. Does anyone? This ag secretary kind of caught me off guard. I don't know. It's a girl? Yeah, I don't know a thing about her, but that doesn't mean she's not. She loves agriculture. I know that.
My background in Georgia, family farm. She was president and CEO of.
That one. I know the one. No. I mean, we all want someone like, I was just me. I was like, oh, maybe Kip Tom will get her this one or that one. Someone who knows corn. But it's not just because you become ag secretary, you get to give away money, right? Is anyone worried for 25, 26, 27? Or is this just part of the cycle, right? Does anyone get confused when the market goes up? Like I would say, people call me more upset when the market explodes with confusion. I mean, you're happy originally, like this is awesome, but now I'm confused. One thing I understand with farmer marketing is the more the market goes up, the less people sell. So if the market's going sideways to nowhere, people get pretty aggressive selling. But when the market goes up hard and goes up really hard, they start selling less on the way up. You would think, don't sell much while it's here and then sell more there. But as the market starts going up, you've already sold low. You didn't know it was low at the time, but it ends up being low. And you become really frustrated when the market goes up. Again, from the beginning of the talk, I think you'd be happier if corn just stayed between 450 and 550. I think the outsides mess you up a little bit. Sometimes the old timers say, I just hope we just take corn down for a few years and put some of these young guys out of business. I don't know that that's good for the ag economy either. I understand what they mean, but it's just not. I'd like to see everyone do well. When people do too well, though, I see some crazy poor decisions, especially from young farmers who I work with in North Dakota. They end up buying new versions of ski-doos and trailers, and I hear stuff like, I bought a new pulling truck. I'm like, great. And so when you just bought all this stuff, none of which you need to actually do production agriculture, you just bought it because you wanted to. And when times get bad, no one wants to buy your pulling truck. No one cares you have a ski-doo or anything else. It's really important to plan out the end of 24 and the beginning of 25 and say, when do I need my money? When am I going to need money? Because a lot of times in grain marketing, people sell grain because they need money, or it's time, or they're two reasons a lot of times people sell grain. 3, 1, they had it forward sold, that's good. 2, they need money, or 3, they're out of space. And if you're out of space, that usually means you held your grain all the way to the next harvest, and then that happens a lot with wheat farmers in the northern plains. Or like when I'm gonna sell a bunch of last year's wheat 2 weeks before harvest starts, I'm like, God, that was expensive to store that wheat the whole time. Any questions or comments? Am I last speaker, Brad?
Yeah, we're going to talk real quick. While you're
Yeah.
doing that, I'm going to bring up Profit Manager, which you're.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And so while you're up here, I want to kind of rope it into you and what I'm doing with Profit Manager.
Sure.
And having those questions about where we're at as a budget. But go ahead while
Question,
Spencer
sir?
brings it up.
You talked earlier about how great our demand is right now, which is internal and export and internal. And I was talking to one of the places I have grain, I sell grain. I just walked outside, like you said, and it was up 7 and sold some more.
Thank you, because I need to buy it. I was caught a little short, so maybe I bought it from you. Now we're both flat.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people were really upset with the pre-harvest basis because they thought this thing was going to be so big and there was so much old corn left out there that there was not going to be any place to store this stuff. Now you go to all these places and the basis is fantastic and none of them are full and they're all looking for corn. They were all wrong. Everything was wrong. So we've had this basis appreciation. Right after harvest, it just snaps back. And so if you did a basis contract, you were upset that the store paid the storage, if you were in a better place because you recovered that basis. So is this basis appreciation going to continue? If we've got grain in storage in bins, we've got it there because of the basis appreciation. That's why it's sitting there. Is that if that's over, then we should just haul it all to town and get rid of it. If you want to buy it back, we can buy it back. But if there's more basis there, then it should set.
Mm-hmm. And you said you store grain for the basis appreciation and also to catch the carry, right?
Well, there is no carry.
There isn't, right, because we just carried out of it. So the spreads are telling you dump your grain. The only thing you would have left is that next basis spot pop. If we keep rallying like this and the spreads tighten, that usually helps calm down the basis. To your point though, when we were planning for harvest, they were making it seem like there was going to be grain piles everywhere in America. And they're, at least in the Midwest, maybe we had some lower bushels here for an odd reason, very like local couple county thing. But I don't hear of anyone showing pictures on the internet of these giant corn piles and stuff. They kind of went away. Also, from when we were all younger, a 2 billion carryout was really big, but with the world getting bigger, no, right. And so we say, shucks, there's a 2 billion carryout. Well, there was a 2.2, then a 2, 1.9, 1.7. Heck, we get down to a 1.5. I don't know how, where all this corn went, but it's going somewhere. Then all of a sudden, we could $5 corn, right? And I think you understand the bin and what to do with it and rewarding the sell. The only part that would be wrong in that is if we had this pop and you watched it, and then it unwound back. Because also like the funds were short 300,000, they went to even, they're long 100, and I saw someone joking today, by Friday they'd probably be long 200 the way they're buying it. If you don't sell it to the funds when they're buying it, then you end up being part of the panic when they sell it. So all the scenarios you want to make a corn sale and be happy just happen. Spreads appreciate, basis appreciate. Don't lose your mind trying to figure out where the corn went, because I don't have time to drive around 100 million acres with a flashlight and knock on bins, right? I don't think we're running out of corn. We're definitely not running out of beans in the area. But to your point, I know you want to know like where the corn went. I don't know, but the market is saying this is a Christmas gift, and I would take it. And if you are so mad you sold the corn, you could buy futures. You could buy calls. Someone says calls don't work. I go, here, buy 10 futures. They'll work right away, up or down. Every penny they move, they're going to move $500. So if you're really in love with owning corn, at least if you sold 10,000 bushels today, you have your 40-some thousand dollars, right? Take your 40-some thousand dollars, and you can invest $1,000 or $2,000 in some form of corn ownership again.
That's my only question was the basis. You know, it really blindsided us, I think, at least me, that we got that kind of basis appreciation so fast. And the only reason to keep corn is if there's more. And I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. They only have to run a basis to where they can get bushels.
A basis is just, you have the Chicago Board of Trade, but that doesn't buy bushels. Local cash markets and end users buy bushels. So the market could do whatever they want, but if they're not buying enough grain, the only way they can get that is to raise the basis. And to your point, where did all the grain go? Because if there's so much grain, they shouldn't have to chase after it. There is, real quick, and I'll let Brad talk, there is still a lot of wealthy farmers with a lot of money. So when we made harvest lows early this year in August and went to 380, those were really, really, really rich farmers who own sections that are paid for, who said, I'm going to show you, I'm not going to sell my corn. And they sold it $1.50 lower. They don't tell anyone. They don't go to the coffee shop and brag about it. But at those days, like 4 or 5 weeks before harvest, we had the most corn, like that old stuff hit. And then they thought the new stuff was going to hit, and that's where all these piles would be. But the low got made, and when that low got made, demand churned. The world said, we like 380 corn, and then they gobbled it up. So. Yeah, great question. Thank you. Profit manager.
Yeah, I mean, I'll set the stage on this. I mean, so this is what I look at a lot. And what this really is, this is a spreadsheet. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with who Chris Barron is, AgView Solutions out of Iowa. I met him back in 2011. Tommy knows who he is. But I don't live by and die by spreadsheets because I don't like analysis or paralysis by analysis, but I do spend a lot of time in this. And what this is actually is this spreadsheet goes through every line item. And so I made basically a 2,500 acre farm, 50-50 corn and beans. And a lot of this data comes out of over 70 different farms in consulting through AgView Solutions. We provide ours on our own farm because we're part of this group, and they provide, there's probably closer to 200-300 spreadsheets they get, but we sift out the ones and we get to like the top tier, and we look at, okay, what are the top tier 70 farms that actually give their budget for every line item. So I don't want to belabor this and go through it all, but I want you to see this. I want to show you guys some things that I'm looking at and the dollars that we spend on our own farm and other farms that we do evaluations and consulting with. And for Tom to even talk about this and looking at, as we look into the 25 year, what is our ROI going to be for corn and beans? And how do we go about adjusting certain things that we're spending money on and actually look at how do we manage this? So, I mean, going down through here, this is basically a paraphrase, but right now, I'll get out of the way of the camera here, sorry. Right now, there's a land contribution cost of $250 an acre. And you'll see what this does, every line item gives you the cost per bushel it takes, what percent margin, and you'll see this change as we change stuff along the way, how many bushels it takes to cover that cost, what the total overall cost is, and what the percent of your total overall cost is. So a guy that's got a $250 an acre land contribution cost, based on the yields we'll show you in a minute, 26% of his cost yearly is sitting in this. At tax right now, obviously, depends on where you're at. This was an average based on everybody's tax situation and also property taxes. If you look at return to management, this is the one that I really get hung up on with a lot of guys. A lot of guys fill that out as zero. Everybody says, well, I don't pay myself. Well, at the end of the year, the bank wants to know how you're going to survive, because if you have everything that's not attached to the farm, how are you going to pay for it? And so what's interesting is through the consulting side of things, a lot of guys that we work with, we got to say, okay, what are you going to say that you're paying yourself? So at $30 an acre, just on corn, he's paying $37.50. So I mean, basically this guy's turning around and making $75,000. He's paying himself no matter what happens to the farm. I know many of us operate the farm. Whatever we make at the end. We operate the farm. But I think going forward, if we're operating as a business, you have to realize your cost and your management is worth something. It's got to be a line item that you got to figure out what it's worth. But this was the average overall. And Jared's been, Jared knows who Chris is, and we were in a peer group together for 5 years, and this is obviously a conglomeration, all these guys. But interest in operating, this is one that actually is very interesting. This is on the low end coming out of 24. That number, honestly, is probably a lot higher than what it should be. I had to use what the average is, but that number per acre at 2% of your overall operating cost is interest, it's probably closer to 4%, realistically speaking, today on this size operation. But we did it for what it is. Insurance, crop insurance, $33 going into 25 is what projected right now. Seed price at 103. Fertilizing lime sitting around 90, and nitrogen around 90. That's figuring right now that you can buy off the Cincinnati River and paid for today, laid in at $279 as of today's Tuesday. That was as of Friday. So $279 a ton. That's down from where we were at last year at $345 average of what was prepaid all the way to also June Q2 pricing. So going down through there, scroll down, Spencer. A line item that has not been in people's budgets up until the last 2 years. You've got herbicide, they had their fungicide, insecticide budget, but no one ever really budgeted bionutritionals. It was just an add-on, right? And what's interesting is now it's become a budget item because I know this is the business we have, right? So I'm kind of lobbying for it. But on the other hand, when we start looking at the money that we're spending, it was all just roped into fertilizer, right? And I said, no, we got to do a better job if we're going to figure this out. If we're going to spend money on nutritionals and bios, what we're using, it's got to be figured in there somewhere and wherever it's at. So obviously, guys mostly average around $25.72 on their chemical price. Fungicide, insecticide, what's interesting, everybody said that's super low. That's actually 1 or 2 applications of a low budget. I mean, it could be an oxystrobe, propiconazole, DMI. That's all generic. It's not spending, $18 for Trevor Pro or, 27 for Velteam or something like that. This is actually getting down to where it's economic. And then the bionutritional piece. So I went back and looked at, on the corn side, average of all our customer base in 2024 is $56.99 they spent per acre on just the corn side. Now, I'm gonna roll through this real quick. This is cost of actual operations of every equipment pass in field operation. We could literally go through every single pass right here. These are pretty close to what the averages were within this 70 group subset. But what's interesting, I went and said, okay, if you're a 2,500 acre farm, what's a realistic tractor that you're gonna be using? What's upgrades that people have been doing on planters and what that value is? And Spencer, if you can just click on the corn planter tab right here. Just so you guys can see how we get this. This is pretty intense. But I mean, you look at a 2010 24 row, that's been upgraded some stuff. There's 250,000. You got an 8RT 370, that's worth 385. 30% of the hours you get to use to planting corn. You got other equipment, right? You got a semi and a tender trailer that's got to take care of it, so there's values there. If it's covering 1,250 acres, and if you're at 385 fuel, and you're based on op center, if you're consuming 11 gallons per hour at 0.33 gallons per acre, and annual cost of ownership, interest depreciation of 10%, your real number, I don't care what Purdue or Illinois or Iowa State says, your real number of operation is $35.67. That's amortized over 5 years. So when everybody says, oh, I can go in there and plant their corn for $25 an acre, you're losing money the minute you roll on the farm. Now, if we increase this to like 2,000 acres, that's going to drive that number down. So obviously it's covering more acres. But we use this on our own farm and we're doing stuff, we know our cost down to the penny on every operation. We also know if people say, hey, well, I need you to come over and plant 500 acres, we know what our cost is going to be because it's tracked all the way down to it. It's hard for me to sit down with Spencer and Marsh and look at our own budget and figure out what we're making when I have no idea, or if I had no idea, what every single pass is costing. And that's why ultimately when we look at our data that we're doing on the bio-nutritional business is we know what our application costs are in there because we track it all down to the penny. So go back into the crop production corn here. So scroll on down through, there's $161 an acre in equipment cost. What's funny is the bank has been talking about this for a while. There's a lot of things but the banks have been budgeting up for the last 5 to 7 years. To your point, Tommy, they've been saying most guys' equipment budgets are sitting around 90 to $100 an acre. What's funny in the last 2 years, because of all the inflationary period, what's been happening, replacement cost of equipment, you talk to banks now, most everybody, if they really get the real true numbers, are sitting $180 to $200 an acre in equipment cost. That's substantially up. I mean, that's double what it was 5 years ago. Well, we didn't double in inflation during that time period. But you look at what the used market did, the replacement costs on the used market. I mean, we could have bought an 8335 2014 tractor with 1,000 hours on it, 5 years ago for probably 150,000. Today, I mean, we can turn around and sell that tractor probably for 185 with the same hours. So, I mean, you look at it, the replacement cost to get something 1,000 hours today is 385,000. So that's over double what 150 is. So it's really easy to figure out where that equipment cost goes. Grain handling and drying, you got hauling at 10 cents, drying at 8 cents, storage at 10 cents in the budget. What I'm getting down to is this total right here. So we got $956 an acre in this. If you scroll down, our cost per bushel is $3.98. At 240 bushel corn at 425 corn, scroll down here a little bit, Spence. We need 225 to cover our cost. Scroll down a little bit more. There we go. This is calculating ROI. So this is 6.7%. You got $63 an acre revenue, 27 cents per bushel profit. That, in my opinion, is super thin, but at least it's green. Now, this is not changing anything. This is putting on full fertilizer, not pulling back on nitrogen, adding the entire whole realm of what we're trying to do as an average for most people. So I just wanted to show you this. It's also got identity calculation over here, where you can actually put in what, if you got enterprise units at revenue protection at 90%, if your APH is 228, I'm just figuring 425 based on what I think may be an average for 2025, but who knows what it's going to be. It gives you what kind of percent you're at risk. You start looking at that, and you can plug in 85%, 70, whatever you guys buy, it doesn't matter. You can also look at ARC County or PLC. It gives that insurance premium there to backflow to figure out if there ever is a trigger of a government payment. Obviously, with these yields, there's not. Now, what I want to do here, Tommy, and I want you to input into it, you guys input into it. This is going to be interactive. So at 240 and a 4 1/4 corn, let's go back up to, keep going right here. I'm dropping $90 an acre in fertilizing lime and $90 an acre in nitrogen. Let's just leave nitrogen alone for a minute, even though we're not trying to be morons, right, Monty? I've been that moron once. He knows the joke. But at fertilizing lime, I can tell you probably 70% of the guys that we've consulted with already this fall, and even pre-fall, we were discussing fertilizer. Bare minimum has been 30% reduction. Bare minimum. There's a lot of people who haven't put anything on. One, we've looked at their soil test levels. They've had other people look at their soil test levels and saying, hey, for the majority of our farms, 90+%, if we've got CECs sitting around that 15 to 18%, organic matter around 2.5%, and we have P1 levels, sitting in that 28 to 30 parts, and some, like on some of our farms, we have some that are 90. Our P2 levels are even higher. We can't get to it. Why am I spending $90 on an acre that I'm going to get less than, let's be honest, 6% return on? Obviously, if you need lime, I don't mind that from a pH standpoint. But the question being is, why am I dropping that? So realistically speaking, what if we took that number and just, let's be super conservative and just say, cut it in half. Make it 45. Spence? Sorry, fertilizing lime. Okay, scroll down a little bit. Now, I'm going to attack this by increasing my phosphorus solubilization, and I'm going to add maybe another pass of foliar at V8, because that did not include the V8 pass. That's just in furrow, 2x2 additive, side dress, and 1 foliar pass. What if I add that, you're looking at 375 and 6, so 975 an acre. Take that to, I'm not quick enough on my math. 56.99 plus 975. Make that 66.74. Scroll all the way down. Okay, whoop, too far. Let's go back up here to the yield level. Does anybody believe, I don't know what yields are going to be at 2. I'm just telling you what our APH over a 5-year time period has been. We're close to 240, actually a little touch over. This year will come down because of this year's yields. But does anybody believe, and this is where I want you to argue with me, your opinion, do you think possibility of 4 1/4 corn is a reality of 25?
Oh yeah, you
As
can
an
get a
average.
lot better than that. Yeah.
Okay, so let's just be conservative and say 4 1/4.
Okay, cash. Not
4 1/4
futures.
cash.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
what you've sold all 25 grain out. It's done. Cash price. Somebody argue with me. Can we still achieve 240 corn?
Yeah.
Might be better.
It's changing, it'll show you. It's just cool.
So let's, yeah, I mean, we can update. So at 240, let's scroll down here. We already changed and took some dollars out of the budget. We went from 6% to 11%. That's a difference of 75,000. And by the way, you're still paying your 75,000 to yourself. Remember, you figured that, right? So guys, what I'm getting at on the corn side, we can play this game all day long. You can scroll up here and say, okay, let's have a year that it goes to 220. Just for giggles. I went to 220. That's a rough year in today's book. If you're used to 240 corn, I'm still making money and paying myself 75,000. Now, what if we go to 260? Let's say you have a 2021 year again, where we had 263 average. Now what are we doing?
You gotta take corn to 375 to do that.
This in this neighborhood, not in yours, sorry. You're at 250 still. No, but I mean, realistically, what happens? I mean, Tommy, what happens if we have a 186 to 188 next year? We truly have another record crop, which I argue whether we did this year or not, but.
And we can go a little lower, yeah, another 50 cents lower. 375 cash would be.
So run at 375 there, Spence. Got to hit enter, I think. Hit enter. Oh, there it changed. Sorry, I missed it. So we're still paying ourselves 75,000 and hitting 5.8% margin, making 53 an acre. Guys, I've ran these scenarios till I'm blue in the face. I spend a lot of time at night doing this when most everybody else is asleep. I'm running scenarios, trying to figure out where we can cut, where we can't, what I can do to add things that I know that our data. I can take Monty's data, I can take Max Systems and Nate Furley's data, and you start looking at what you can do on your farm to protect yield and add revenue. I can't add yield, I can protect yield, but I can add revenue by doing that. I start going through those scenarios all the time, trying to figure out what equation makes the most sense. Now let's flip to beans real quick.
Before you go to beans,
Yep.
probably the second most asked question from everyone that we've had, other than can I reduce most of my phosphorus, is more and more people are looking at non-GMO corn. Monty hit on it a lot because it's part of his system, but for the rest of us, we're looking at it. So
Scroll down this one.
take your corn contribution
Yep.
from wherever you had it.
Sorry.
So
Yep.
let's call it 78 to 80 and just see what it looks like.
76.44. If you want a Beck's non-GMO price right now, go to 76.44 bag or acre. Right here.
And then put your other levels back to your averages.
Yep.
It's more realistic.
Yep. So we take that to 90. Now go to, because we're going to spend a little more on the bionutritional and keeping things healthy. Scroll down. Let's say it's fine to leave it at 66. Keep going down the bottom. Let's take this just back to 240 for giggles. And turn this to, what's the number you guys want to use? Let's say 4 1/4 corn is our average for 24. You get 20-cent premium? 30? Anybody in here hauling the grain millers?
Keep it no premium.
Okay.
For the guys that don't have a premium market.
Sure.
You can't get into non-GMO program grain mills, it's way tied up.
Okay, so let's take that for example. Tommy, what's your opinion? I know we don't have a clue what's going to happen with this administration, but with RFK Jr., is there a potential even if we do, just leave it at 4 1/4? Will there even be a potential? I know this is very crystal ball, we have no idea what's going to happen, but would there be a potential of a non-GMO export market, especially with Mexico demanding non-GMO long term? Will that actually ever come to fruition?
I'd be more worried if you were growing red food dye. I'm not too worried about corn yet, that something dramatic. We just can't change things that quick because someone came in administration, right?
That's my question. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they can like just slam stuff around, and there'll be some changes. There'll be some suggestions of healthier things, but you just can't get everyone to change what they're doing. I mean, American ag's big, right? When I look at a map, you look like you're 5 minutes from my house, and it's going to take me 2 hours to get up there. People are going to do what they're going to do. I don't think he'll have much of an effect.
So literally put the fertilizer back to 90. We're spending a little more on the bionutritional side of things. Still 4.25 corn at 240. You just lowered your seed price and you picked up another 2.4, 2.5% margin just by lowering seed price and raising non-GMO.
Does the bean version of all this look not so pretty?
Beans don't look pretty. So let's
For
go.
anyone, right?
Yeah.
One thing that you might factor into the, I have to believe though, and I got $86 an acre on my non-GMO corn I bought from you, is that there may be a yield reduction.
Let's talk about that.
Because, and I'm not saying there can't be a yield increase because of it, but normally your better genetics are in the traded products. And if you're going to go 100% non-GMO, and you're going to spread your maturities out, you're going to have some older hybrids and some less elite hybrids.
So we got three,
You
four.
You may need to have a little bit of a yield change there.
Right. Well, we can look at it either way. I will say, and there's 4 people in this room out of the genetic world in here that have had long tenures and careers in the genetic world. I will say, in the face of pest pressure, I'll give you a 90+%. Most genetics will out yield themselves in the non-GMO versus the traded in the event of no pest pressure.
In our area.
Yeah.
Because we have low
Correct.
low pressures.
Correct.
We're not protecting as much yield here as they would be in Central.
Correct. Now I'll pass it to some other people. Monty, Doug, you guys have been in the genetic world for a long time. What's your opinion?
On soybeans, non-GMO still has, you're not going to have any yield drag with traits. So non-GMO, if you can keep the field clean, weed-free, still has a yield advantage.
Your opinion, non-GMO today on corn? Behind or ahead, same, indifferent, what?
I personally, my opinion is compared to.
You've been non-GMO so long.
I don't know. So I think you have to look at the basics of not all germplasm can accept GMO introduction. And then so you automatically kick out 10 or 20% of the germplasm. Just cannot take a GMO input. Then when you go to multiple traits, we're swimming in 40% of the pond that can do a 8-way stack. So not all of the inbreds can be genetically altered. Now that will change as the new editing technologies become available. They'll become more of the base germplasm can be modified. So when was the last time we haven't counted a 16 row around here? I mean, 30, 40 years ago, ear shape and size and leaf structure. When you went to plot day, everything looked really different. It's pretty similar now. You know who Cortez lines are, and you know who Barry lines are. That's the majority of the market. I mean, it's pretty boring. But is that good or bad? It just is what it is. We're working with less.
Yeah, so we raised all non-GMO except for last year. We had one hybrid that wasn't just because we couldn't get a non-GMO.
Right. We did a replicated study this year with in-furrow programs, same programs, conventional same variety, 5393.
Yep.
Double versus conventional. Conventional was 2 bushels less across 4 reps. I mean, and that was under 38 inches of rain, so it got beat up pretty bad from weather. So, in my mind, I don't know if you're comparing apples to apples, variety to variety, I don't know that you're taking much. But it depends on the best, right? Yes, definitely.
Right, yeah. Would we take this to, I mean, high rootworm areas? No. But could,
Yeah.
I got a silly question, Brad. When you guys as farmers are trying out some new products, how big of a field do you think you need to get an accurate go? Like 40 acres? How much do you have to do to say, I think I like that, to do more of that next year?
I'll let them answer because I have a whole different way of doing things, so.
Okay. Anyone? If you were trying something new, how many acres would you throw at it?
Or what percent of your acres? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
You got 1,000 acre corn.
I would imagine like 10%, right? Hey, we're going to put 10% of that. I don't know.
I do it in blocks, like something new, I do it in a small block, like
Mm-hmm.
it looks like there's some positive to get along expanded to a larger block. Try to take a lot of those variables out, even so much so where I left the grass strip and get good access. And then I'll bring in independent people that aren't part of our team, evaluate it just with some unbiased feedback.
Because as your farms are evolving and you're trying to grow more bushels, it's not like you're just going to totally switch your program. Like we were doing this, you got to like gradually do it.
You got to explain why. Show it on paper with numbers that you're at.
We move faster.
Yeah.
Just because there's so much. I mean, the average hybrid today lasts 1.8 years in the lineup.
Sometimes in marketing, people say, I'm going to hire you and you could do 10% of my grain marking. I say, okay, well, ask your wife how many times she's been kind of pregnant. And I can't do nothing with 10%, but that's a different scenario. I was just hired by a very, 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 very large farm in South Dakota. And they said, we're going to let you do half of our grain marketing to watch you for a year or two. That's different. But if I was a farmer, I would be conservative and then give it a few years and then get aggressive on something new, right? I'm scared. Let me try it. Oh my God, do it again. And then it probably takes 2-3 years to start adapting new things was my question.
And that's where the challenge I've come into for my tenure in the career. By 3 years down the road, it's gone. I mean, like I said, the average hybrid lasts 1.8 years in the lineup in all of the companies in America. By the time you get to year 2, there's already something behind it coming. So that's reliant. For me, just because our tenure working, and I'm not trying to promote Bex I'm just saying that's where we came from. I got a good group of people behind us that I trust, that I used to work with that, okay, I'm taking what they're saying, I'm looking at their data plus what we look at on our own. And that's the reason why we plant these plots around here. They're not for anything other than us to really evaluate how certain genetics work inside of how we manage things. So when everybody drives down the road and they see our corn on corn plots, our corn on bean plots, our bean plot, they're like, oh yeah, I mean, you're just looking at what hybrid did the best. I'm like, I really don't care what did the best. I'm looking at what is the overall average over a 2-year time period. Because I know once I get past 2 years, we're moving on. What I'm trying to see is what family of genetics long-term are being changed by what we're manipulating things doing inside our own program. And I will tell you, there are drastic differences. You can see certain genetics and certain background genetics respond different to different management styles. And I can tell you, there's some stuff we could throw the kitchen sink at. I can spend $200 an acre on more on stuff, right? And I'm not going to change that hybrid that much. Yet there's some stuff we can spend $60-80 an acre and do something to manipulate that hybrid based on how it reacts to sulfur, how it reacts to boron, how it likes to chelate things. And when you can actually do foliar applications to it, you can change that hybrid and completely enact it to do different things and bring more money and ROI. So it's kind of fun when we work with guys that are not buying Bex. When I ask them what hybrids you're planting, they're like, oh, I don't know, 1188, 1368, what I mean from Pioneer, or the Calb 6688 or something like that. I'm like, okay, I know the background of those, or I know close to it. So, I mean, we can start stacking the deck for those guys to help them based on what they're wanting to use.
you pull up beans? Oh, did we want to see that? Or you guys already saw that? Yeah, what it changed to. So pull up beans real quick.
I think you should have started with beans, bum people out, and finished with corn. I got a feeling how this is going to go.
Yeah.
But beans can rally $1 or $2 quickly for reasons we didn't know till they do it, right?
So same contribution cost, pretty much. Insurance is different, seeds different. Obviously no fertilize, no lime, no nitrogen. Herbicides, if you're running a burn down program and a 2-pass pre-emerge and post, you're gonna have 58 to 65 bucks an acre in it. F&I, if you're using that was just the average, came around 15 for all that 70 farm group. Bionutritional, so I went back and looked at the average of what all of our customer base spent per acre last year in 2024. It was $62.41 an acre. And that's all in foliar. That's actually, there was only 2 people out of that were in furrow other than us. And that was mostly, generally speaking, about 3-pass foliar program as an average for everybody. If you scroll on down, 121 an acre in equipment contribution based on beans. This is only 1 pass of VT tillage in the fall, nothing in the spring. 3-pass sprayer. So if you look at that, actually, if you look at the sprayer pass area, we don't have to, but it's actually cost less to run a 2019 Hagee at $385,000 contribution cost. When you guys run that many acres, it gets really cheap to run a sprayer. I will say this, if anybody ever asks me what's the #1 piece and the #1 tool on your farm to make you the most money and cost you the least amount of dollars, it's a sprayer. And if you're only doing it to spray herbicide and you got a $400,000 sprayer or more and you're spraying 1 pass on corn, 1 pass on beans, you are underutilizing an asset that can make you more money than you've ever dreamed of. But you've got to think outside the box. Obviously, there's 10 cents a bushel hauling, storage cost of 5 cents. Boil it down, 75 bushel beans at $10.25. We're sitting around that $91.57. Now, that's pouring as much as I can get to it based on that level. There are ways to cut through in there. Do we think we can get 10.25? Because we're not at 10.25 today.
Easily, yeah. You can get that. The only bad thing is if you change that 10.25 to 8.25, that'd be messed up. You go 8.25 there and go 65 bushels, you could have some serious losses, right?
Let's look at it.
Yeah, that's what's scaring people in the bean market.
And what's really even more scary is a 66 APH at 90% based on this on enterprise units, still at that level would not trigger.
Mm-hmm.
That's your tax dollars at work.
So I'm not here to tell you buy crop insurance or not, but we've been asking the question for the last 2 years. This year it paid us because we had bushel and revenue loss. But my question is, we went back to 85%. We were buying 90 and 95%. I know what I'm spending per acre on my crop. My question is, where's my money best spent? Is my money best spent, and I look at a 5-year average, keeping my fertility, spending money on soil amendment, spending money on fertility and plant health, or is my money buying federally funded crop insurance? And I can tell you after a 5-year average, we can show you that report based on data. We spend more money on our crop than we'll ever dream of spending on crop insurance. Because this is the first time since I started farming on my own in 2008 that I've ever had crop insurance pay me anything. Even the 12 drought barely even didn't trigger much because of price. So, I mean, I'm looking at the question, obviously we have to buy crop insurance for some reasons for the bank, but I'm trying to buy it as least amount as possible to cover my rear end and taking that extra margin I should be and contributing back to putting in the crop in the soil. I know that doesn't sell a lot of crop insurance, and I probably got people going to watch this, they're going to blow me up and be pissed at me for unselling crop insurance. But when you open that bag, guys, and you put that seed in the ground, 100% of your investment's sitting in that. What are you doing to protect it? And what's your biggest return? So you guys can play around with this all you want. You can tell me what numbers you want to see. If something makes sense, we can bring the rest of the guys up here because I know we've got some questions that have actually been texted to us and emailed to us today. I'll bring everybody up here and you guys fire away. That's you guys that talk today.